Hi everyone, I'm Nikki Boxler and I am out here in the sugar bush, also known as the Maple Woods, and maple season is in full swing. If you've been following me for a while, you know that we produce maple syrup. Well, I guess even if you're new here, you probably know that. But my family produces maple syrup and we tap primarily maple trees. So first things first, I want to go over the basics of everything you need to know about tapping a maple tree. I am out in the Maple Woods today and it is an absolutely beautiful day. Maple season is in full swing. As you can see, all the trees behind me are tapped and the sap is really flowing today. It's looking really good through the lines. And this week should be good maple weather, which is exciting because right now we haven't produced very much and we really don't want another year like last year, because last year was a terrible season for maple producers. So we're hoping that this year will be a bit better. But the reason I am out here is because I wanted to walk through the basics of tapping a tree, specifically tapping maple trees. So that way you at home, if you have maple trees around, you can get out there and tap some trees. It is something that I grew up doing with my family. It's always a really fun and something we look forward to from year to year. So without further ado, let's learn all about tapping trees. So first things first, before you start tapping a tree, is you want to identify it to make sure it's a maple. So that's going to be a whole nother video. I will link it here so that way you guys can learn how to identify a maple, but we are going to jump right into it and go over the basics of tapping the tree. So before you tap a tree, you want it to reach a certain size. So what is that size? It is measured at diameter at breast height, meaning 4.5 feet off the ground. So at 4.5 feet off the ground, you want it to be either 10 inches in diameter or 31 inches in circumference. And if you're not sure how large that is, you can actually use a ruler to measure the diameter, or you can take the circumference and divide it by pi or divide it by 3.14. So if I wanted to measure the circumference of this tree or figure out the diameter, I actually just brought a measuring tape. So I'm going to do the circumference here. See if I can reach all the way around this tree. All right, so I just measured the circumference of this tree and it came out to be 66 inches. So now to figure out the diameter, since I'm not very good at math, is I'm going to calculate it. So 66 inches divided by pi, or 3.14. And that comes out to be 21 inches in diameter. Which means this tree is large enough that it can actually have 2 taps. And it actually does. So the line comes around and I'll walk you around this so you can see both taps, but this tree does have 2 taps. And this tree does, if we walk around it, have 2 taps. But a quick way, if you're not going to measure, we've been doing this for so long that you can look at a tree and gauge how big it is to see how many taps it gets. But a quick way to do it is if your arms can barely fit around the tree or they don't fit around it at all. So let me change the angle here. So my arms don't touch. I can't wrap my arms all the way around the tree. That's a quick gauge to tell you that this tree can have 2 taps. And many people ask if tapping a tree hurts the tree, and it does not. So some of our trees have actually been tapped for over 100 years. My great-grandpa came over in the early 1900s and he started tapping, and we have been tapping these woods ever since. So as long as the trees are happy and healthy, they will continue producing for you for well over 100 years, because a sugar maple can live to be 300-400 years old. And we actually have some of those trees on our property, which is pretty cool to think about, because I'm one of those people that I love family history, and I just love knowing my roots and where I came from. And just to think back that my great-grandfather tapped some of these trees is really mind-blowing, and to imagine what these trees have lived through and what they have seen. If trees could talk, we would hear some pretty crazy stories. So when you are tapping trees, there are several things to look for after you determine how many taps each tree will get. So when you approach the tree, you want to look up at the canopies and make sure the tree is alive. If you look up and there's only one limb coming off the tree, there's a pretty good chance that that tree might be dead. And in that case, you do not want to tap the tree. And then when you are tapping a tree, which tapping a tree just means that you are drilling a hole in the tree to insert a spout. So when you are tapping that tree and drilling the hole, you want to be sure to look at the shavings that come out of the tree. You want them to be a light cream colored. That's a sign of a good, healthy tree. If the shavings that come out are darker brown, that's not a good sign, and you either want to tap in a new location or double check and make sure that tree is still alive. Trees that are healthy will typically grow over their old tap holes within 1 to 3 years. So when tapping a tree, if the tree hasn't been tapped very often, it's pretty easy to find a location where you're going to tap next. So usually you can just go to the opposite side of the tree and just kind of keep rotating around. However, if you're like us and you have some trees that have been tapped for over 100 years, sometimes those trees tend to get quite a few holes in them. So we are going to look at a tree so you can identify where you should be putting that new tap hole. So when you are tapping a tree, you want to identify where the old holes are, because you want a nice clean area of the tree to tap in the spout. So this woods is a really good example, because we have been tapping these woods for quite some time. So as you can see, we have an old tap hole here. So we have one here. So this is what the tap holes look like as they start to grow over. Here's another one. And a lot of times if you look, you can't even really tell that it was tapped. The outer bark is where you can see where the drill bit was, but the tree actually grew over already inside the hole. So if this outer bark was peeled off, you wouldn't even be able to tell where it was tapped last. And here is where our tree is now tapped. So from the old tap hole, you want to be at least 6 inches laterally from the old tap hole, and then about 24 inches either above or below it. And when you are tapping a tree, you want to gently pound in the spout. And a lot of our trees in this section particularly are tapped really high, as you can see, because there was a couple feet of snow when we were tapping. So even though that's really high now, I can barely reach the spout. When we were tapping, it wasn't quite that high. I was still reaching above my head, but not quite that high. Here's another old tap hole. Again, it's only the outer bark. So as a general rule, a tree that's 10 to 17 inches in diameter will get 1 tap, and a tree that's 18 to 24 inches in diameter will get 2 taps. And then the very maximum amount of taps that you want on a tree is 3. So 3 taps for your largest trees in the woods. And that's gonna be any tree that's 25 inches or more in diameter. And I'm going to throw up a little guideline for you guys for when you are tapping trees, so you can look at it as a quick reference to see how many taps per tree you should put on your maple trees. Here at Boxer Maple, we primarily tap sugar maples because they produce a sweeter sap and they bud a little later than other maple trees. So red maples, you can tap them, but their sap isn't as sweet and they bud before your sugar maples do. So that is why we primarily tap sugar maples. And now we're actually going to look at the shape of the tree. There are no leaves on these trees, and this is a pretty nice woods. So if you look up at the trees, you can see that the maple trees have a larger canopy, and that's a really good sign. So a tree that has a larger crown or that has less competition from other trees, it generally produce more and sweeter sap. And if you are at home tapping your trees at home, the trees that typically produce the most and the sweetest sap are the ones with the larger crowns at the top. So trees that grow in lawns, along roadsides, ones that get a lot of sunshine, those are really good trees. Those are the ones that you really want to tap because they're going to produce more sap. And when you're tapping trees, you can kind of get an estimate of how much syrup you will produce. So a larger tree that has a big crown will produce more and sweeter sap and has more sugar content within that sap. So those trees throughout the entire season will produce somewhere around a half a gallon of syrup, whereas a smaller tree or a tree that has more competition around it to fight with other trees will generally only produce about a quart of syrup for the entire season. And I believe I have now covered all the basics of how to tap a tree and what to look for when tapping a tree. I may have missed something, I don't know. There's so much, and sometimes I just kind of forget what I've talked about. But if I miss something, I will be sure to address it in an upcoming video. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you guys have any questions about anything, please comment below. I am very active in my comments section, so I will get back to you right away. And you never know, it gives me video ideas so that way I can produce more videos and content that you guys would like to see. But thank you for tuning in. If you like this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you guys next time.